There is a marked difference between the rhetoric and the ideology of those opposite and the reality faced by the Australian people. We see in terms of the answers today, answers from ministers saying that they take the advice of experts, and yet we see in a subsequent answer by the same minister a defence of decisions by this government where the advice of experts was actually ignored. And what we see is the rhetoric about what this government is seeking to achieve in terms of cost of living relief and investment in the economy and things made in Australia, but the lived reality for people in Australia is different. So it's fascinating to highlight that despite the rhetoric of those others, the reality is that the National Accounts figures have revealed the slowest GDP growth since the 1990s outside the period of the pandemic, the sixth quarter of negative GDP per person growth and the longest per capita recession in 50 years. That's 18 months of a household recession under this government. I do seem to recall a slogan during the last election that it won't be easy under Mr Albanese, and that has certainly proven to be the case. With living standards, that being the real disposable income per capita, falling by 8.7%. And I noticed an article in the Australian Financial Review that highlights that Australia stands in stark contrast to most other comparable nations around the world. Productivity has collapsed by 6.3%. Household savings are down by 10.2 percentage points, and personal income taxes are 25.3% higher, and interest paid on mortgages has almost tripled. Gas is up by 33%. Electricity nationally is up by 14%, and even more in my home state of South Australia, where, I'll just remind the Senate, despite all the rhetoric about the transition to variable renewables being the pathway for the future, South Australians pay 45 cents per kilowatt hour, which is by a long stretch the most expensive power in Australia and amongst the most expensive electricity in the world. Rents are up 16%, health is up 11%, education costs are up 11%, food is up by 12%, and financial and insurance products are up by 17%. And these have impacts on people in the real world. So despite the ideology and the rhetoric from those opposite, when I visit the operator of a small caravan park in South Australia, she tells me about the fact that those rising insurance costs and the rising electricity costs are making her business marginal in terms of the ability to continue trading and providing a service for people who choose to travel through or holiday in that part of regional South Australia. And so the rhetoric we even heard here today, is about a government that says we listen to the experts. But we also had evidence here today that that is clearly not the case. If we're concerned about growth and economic opportunities and work and income for families, then you'd think we would be listening to the experts to approve investments in things like mines here in Australia. We heard today, and we've seen in the press, the fact that experts, in the case of McPhillamys mine in New South Wales, being the state EPA, highlighted that the waters from the tailing dam would not affect the rivers and normal processes would look after that. We saw the fact that the local Indigenous body highlighted there were no issues from a cultural perspective to stop this project, and yet the minister concerned blocked the development of this mine by one action, a decision around the tailing mines, which didn't come from the experts, but came from a group of people who don't even reveal their last names in terms of the registration of their organisation, over facts which they said they can't disclose publicly because essentially they're secret business. This is not a government where the reality that affects Australian matches their reality.
Thank you.